Hello there, you scrub lords, and welcome back to another beginner's guide. And today we're going to be discussing what makes a shell good. Now, I know when a lot of people started coming into the game, it was a matter of just fire whatever round had the most penetration, and in games like World of Tanks, that is certainly far more the case. In War Thunder, though, penetration isn't everything, and I'm here to tell you exactly why. So without further ado, let's get into it. So to start with, we're going to use the Tiger H1 as an example. Now the Tiger H1 gets access to several different types of ammunition. The Tiger H1 is given a Panzergranate 39 APC BC round with an HE filler. You can also see that it has another one after that called the Panzergranate. That one is also an APC BC round with an HE filler. Did Gaijin mess up on this one, or is there a real difference between the two? Well, yes there is, and a lot of people will consider that this upgraded round is better. But if you look closely, if you look at the penetration tables for the Panzergranate 39, 165mm of penetration at 10 meters, 162 at 100 against flat armor, and then you got stuff like 119mm at 500 meters at 60 degrees. It's a pretty good shell. However, when you go down to the Panzergranate, you'll see that the penetration actually drops by about 15 to 20mm across the board. However, this is generally considered to be the better shell. Now, if you are a War Thunder veteran and you know what you're doing, you're going to instantly know why this is the case. However, for a new player, they might not know the difference, and they'd be very puzzled why the better shell has lower penetration. And like I said earlier, penetration isn't everything. What you have to really look for is the explosive mass of a shell, or the equivalent explosive mass. And in terms of equivalent explosive mass, we're going to talk about TNT as an explosive. Generally, as a rule, from what I've seen, anything that has 100 grams of TNT and up is generally considered to be a pretty good APHE shell. And the thing about APHE is, it's pretty simple. It penetrates a certain distance inside of a vehicle and detonates at a 360-degree arc. So, like I said, the Panzergranate, the shell we were looking at just now, has 160 grams of HE filler. That's really good. If you look at the standard shell, you only have 64 grams, which means that despite the fact that it's still an 88mm gun, still the same diameter shell, and it has a little bit more penetration, you lose some of the damage that comes with that. So there's always this risk that the higher penetration you have, the more likely that you are going to over-penetrate the target, meaning your shell enters one side of a vehicle, goes out the other, and does very little damage. And we'll see more of that at the higher tiers when I talk about their shells in a moment. But anyways, the other thing to look out for, other than HE filler, is the fuse sensitivity. And this is incredibly important, and it was a little bit more so important for a short while before hull brake was implemented on light vehicles. And the reason I say that is that when the M18 Hellcat was introduced into the game with the American tank destroyers, all the Tigers at 5.7 started realizing, I'm firing 88mm armor-piercing rounds, and they're just over-penetrating the Hellcats and doing very little damage, leaving the Hellcat the ability to take a return shot or to get away. And this was really frustrating for a lot of people, and a lot of people were wondering why their APHE shells were not detonating inside of the Hellcat. And the reason for that is fuse sensitivity. You can see there, it says fuse sensitivity, 28mm. If we go and look at the Hellcat and look at its hull armor, you can see it's only 12.7mm, and at its thickest with the angling, it's only about 27mm thick. And again, this caused a lot of frustration for Tiger players, because their shells were just acting like slugs, or a certain thickness of a target, in order for the shell to properly go off. And since the M18's hull armor is only about 26mm at its best, the hull armor of the M18 will not set off the HE filler of a Tiger. There are two more things that you need to keep in mind here when looking at a shell. What are its bounce chances, and what is the muzzle velocity? First of all, we're going to look at muzzle velocity. Muzzle velocity is one of the most important things that you need to understand. A high muzzle velocity is generally considered, at least in my opinion, anything over about 700 meters per second. Anything above that, you've got pretty good muzzle velocity, and anything 1,000 or above is really good muzzle velocity. It's also worth noting, however, that having a low muzzle velocity has its benefits as well. In the case of if there's an enemy behind a piece of cover, say a ridge, you have a lower muzzle velocity gun, there's a higher propensity chance that you can lob that shell over the ridge and hit the enemy tank. However, with lower muzzle velocity, especially in the case of AP rounds, generally comes lower penetration. Two exceptions to this are the three exceptions technically, are HE, HESH, and heat. Those three, the muzzle velocity doesn't really matter, your penetration stays the same at all distances. That you need to look at here, outside of the muzzle velocity and the things we've talked about before, HE filler and penetration, the angle of attack with 100%, 50% chance, and 0% chance of ricochet. The lower those degree numbers are, the better. Now, AP has one of the highest propensities to ricochet, and by that I mean simply hitting the vehicle but not actually doing any penetration damage and simply just bouncing off and going in a different direction, ricocheting away from the vehicle and away from the armor. The last thing that you need to keep in mind with these sorts of ricochet angles is the penetration against the sloped surface of the armor. So, in this case, the M72 shot has 39mm of penetration against sloped armor. If you double that 39mm of penetration, you get the highest amount of armor that shell will penetrate. In this case, it is 78mm. So anything greater than 78mm at that sloping, or any effective armor up to 78mm at that sloping, will not penetrate. It will fail the penetration test and therefore just shatter on impact. Whereas the ricochet chances means that it fails the ricochet chance, or is reflected away from the vehicle, and does no other damage to the vehicle in either case. So it's important to realize what the effect of that 30-degree angle is. If it's got the same or higher, then you have an absolutely ridiculous shell for use against sloped armor. And there's only two types of shell in the game that have the same or more penetration against sloped armor, and that is armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding Sabo and Hesh, both of which you will not see until Tier 5. So there are 5 things that you need to look at when determining how good a shell is. 1. Penetration. How much armor will you penetrate, especially at 30 degrees? Remember, take 30-degree penetration and double it to find the best penetration value against effective armor at that angle. Number 2, HE filler. Does the shell in question have it or not? If it does, what is its TNT equivalent? Remember, anything above 100 grams is considered at least decent. Fuse sensitivity. If it has HE filler, how much armor must your shell penetrate before it detonates? Muzzle velocity. How fast is your shell flying? What is its trajectory while flying through the air? Is its trajectory flat, or is it more in an arc, allowing you to hit targets behind cover? If it's 700 meters or higher, it is generally considered to be a high-velocity round. Number 5. Chances of ricochet versus slope. What are the chances that your shell will ricochet off sloped surfaces? Remember, the lower the degree of the slope that your shell will ricochet, the less likely it is to bounce off of sloped surfaces. So I hope this guide has helped some of you newer players figure out what to look for when studying your shell types. If you have further questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section, or join my Discord server using the link in the description below. Without further ado, this has been Many Miles Away. Keep your tracks checked, keep your bindings in place, keep around on the tube, and I will see you guys in the next video.